So without further ado, with us today, we have Susan Cowling. Susan Cowling is a Master Gardener volunteer for Lake County Extension. She was, she became a Master Gardener volunteer in 2008. She has over 3,000 hours of service and continuing education in the Master Gardener world. She is also our coordinator for all things Meet Us in the Garden. And typically she is our moderator for Meet Us in the Garden. And today I get to take on that role. I'm Tom DeHaas, OSU Extension Educator for Lake County, Ohio. But without any further ado, I will turn it over to Susan Cowling. Susan, go ahead and unmute yourself, and it's all yours.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everybody. Today, we want to talk a little bit about holiday plants. I don't know about you, but when I woke up this morning, my thought was, oh my gosh, it's pretty close to Christmas. It's going to start snowing anytime. But we really want to get our plants in and ready. And I think it's important to look at how to select them and how to care for them. So the plants that we're going to cover, I'm just going to do three, but they're the primary ones that we see around the holidays. We'll talk about poinsettias, what I'm going to refer to as holiday cactus, because there are three forms of that, and amaryllis, those beautiful trumpet blooms that we see around this time of year. And we're going to talk first about how to select good ones, and how to care for them when you have them in your home, and then what you do when the blooms are gone. You can, I suppose, pitch them, but you could also just recycle them. So let's talk about what plants we're going to be seeing. And it's always so stunning to go into a store and see the wide variety of poinsettias that are out there. They are available in many different colors. You saw before, there's even a yellow one now. There is a peach. Some are marbled, some are speckled. Mostly they're red or white, or versions of that. 80%, in fact, are sold in the United States are red. Now, bracts are the colored portion of the poinsettia. The bracts are these beautiful leaves, because this is actually the flower, that little bitty bit in the middle of all those beautiful bracts. The bracts are designed to attract pollinators when they're grown outside. Now, poinsettias, well, they are native to the west coast of Mexico, and believe it or not, they can grow to be 12 feet tall. Can you imagine looking at a poinsettia plant covered with these gorgeous bracts and 12 feet tall? I think it would be stunning. The person who brought them to the United States was Joel Roberts Poinsett, and he brought them in a plant exchange to the United States in the 1800s. And then Paul X Sr. of California started working with poinsettias and cultivated them so that they could be grown indoors. Because let's face it, we certainly aren't going to be growing poinsettias outside in Northeast Ohio, because they just aren't going to survive. They became the #1 selling plant in the United States, probably because they were focused on, I believe, the Johnny Carson show, the Dinah Shore show, and even some of the Bob Hope's holiday specials. December 12th, look forward to that, is Poinsettia Day. And it was called Poinsettia Day because that is the day that Poinsett died. Now, moving to holiday cactus, these are all forms of cactus. You can see there are beautiful, different colored, orange, pink, red, purple, and some white. Now, the thing we need to remember is the thing we call Christmas cactus isn't really a Christmas cactus. It's called that because it blooms in late December through March. What we call Christmas cactus is really the Thanksgiving cactus. And that's because it blooms between late November and late December. There is also an Easter cactus, which blooms between March and May. Now, this is how you can tell the difference. I'll lay odds that whatever you're calling a Christmas cactus is this one on the right, the Thanksgiving cactus. It's got the sharp claw-like points on it. The other two are quite rounded. The Easter cactus has these hair-like fibers off the end of the stem. And the true Christmas cactus has much more rounded stems instead of these sharp ones. Now, they are true cacti. They came from the mountainous jungles of Brazil. They're what are called epiphytic plants. These are plants that latch on to other plants or even shady areas of cliffs and high points in the forest. They get their moisture and nutrients from the air, rain, water, or even debris that accumulate around it. Now, we've altered their living conditions, if you will, when we bring them into our homes and we put them in pots. So that's one of the reasons you have to be very careful about how much moisture you give to these plants. We'll talk about that later. Moving on to amaryllis, I just always have at least one of these in my home around the holidays. And I try and find the most unique one I can find. Although red and white are the most popular, you can also find pink or salmon or apricot, rose, burgundy, and even bicolored, such as this one and this one. Flowers actually can range from 4 to 10 inches wide. I don't think I've ever had one that was 10 inches wide, but I've gotten them past 6. And they can be single or double. They are native to Peru and South Africa, and their name comes from the Greek word amarisso, to sparkle. And you can see why that would make sense. They arrived in Europe in the 1700s, and then obviously came over to the States. And they have recorded bulbs that have bloomed over and over again for up to 75 years. So I don't think you should think about throwing them away. I think you could maybe have it around for a long time. We'll talk about how to do that later. Today, most amaryllis aren't the native ones from Peru and South Africa. They've been hybridized. And so that's how they get these beautiful variegated and rose-edged petals. So how do you select the best plants? Well, with poinsettias, you want to make sure that you have dark green foliage all the way down the stem. If you notice that the lower leaves are missing, it's probably not been well cared for. Your bracts should be very bright, and I don't mean because they've been spray painted. They should be naturally bright colors. The foliage should be very fresh, and if you see any wilting evident, please don't take that plant. And do check the undersides of the leaves for white flies. You can see here a plant that's just riddled with white flies on the left, and this is an up close shot of what those white flies look like. This is a very common problem for poinsettias, and if you're buying them from not a terribly reputable place, you really have to be quite careful. Flowers, I've talked about before, are in the very center of the bracts, and they are yellow or green, but they're little button-like objects. They should be very tightly closed, and you shouldn't see any yellow pollen or very little. If you see a lot of pollen, that means that the plant is older than it might look like based on everything else. So when you come home, you're going to put it in a protective sleeve, because even temperatures in the high 40s could damage the bracts and leaves. So today would be an example. Don't go outside with one without a protective sleeve around it, because even brief exposure to very cold temperatures, even just above freezing, can cause your leaves and bracts to drop off. If the bracts drop off, you no longer have a poinsettia you want to display. And never, never, never leave it in a cold car. That's like putting it in a refrigerator. With holiday cactus, again, you want green, sturdy foliage. You want to look for buds not thoroughly bloomed out. If the plant you're looking at is thoroughly bloomed out, you don't have many days to enjoy it, because they're going to drop off. Make sure that the soil isn't wet. Some of the stores overwater their plants, and if the cactus has been setting in damp soil or soggy soil, that's the surest way to kill them. Again, you want to wrap them before you take them outside, unless it's a sunny, bright 60-degree day. Again, the temperatures will damage leaves, and it will cause all of your flowers to drop off. Always check for disease or insects or the presence of damage from those. Amaryllis. Now, I know you can buy them already in bloom, but I just love to get my bulb and watch it grow and send up the shoots. And it's always a surprise to me how fast it can grow. But if you are buying your bulb for the first time, look for the largest you can find, because then you'll get more stalks and more blooms, because the larger the bloom, the more the flowers. And much like you might check a piece of fruit in the store, you're going to want to touch this and make sure that they're not soggy, that there's no signs of decay or injury. And as you will see in this picture, you might have some growth already starting. And we're going to talk about that in a different way later on. But that new growth should be bright green. It shouldn't have nicks or dents or bruises. And if you notice, sometimes down at the bottom, when you pick up a bulb, there'll be an offshoot. Don't worry about that. The root system is going to help that to develop into another plant for you. And when it's large enough, you'll just break it off and you'll have two. Okay, so you've got your poinsettia at home. What do? Well, obviously you take the sleeve off of it. You don't leave that on. And you place it near a sunny window or other well-lighted area. They like the sun. It keeps their bracts bright. But don't let it touch the window pane, because even if you've got double hung windows or double pane windows, it still can be chilly, and that doesn't do your poinsettia any good. Don't let it sit in a draft or near a heat vent. So if your windowsill is right above a heat vent, maybe you should find a different place to put it. They also like their temperatures between 60 and 70, and they like it cooler in the evenings. And always make sure with this and any plant that there's a drainage hole in the pot, because you want water to be able to drain out and not sit surrounding the roots. Now, poinsettias are very picky about the amount of moisture they've got. So you want to check them daily. If they dry out, they'll drop their bracts. You use the finger test. It's very simple. Just stick your finger in the soil about up to the first knuckle. And if that soil is dry to the touch, then water it. And I typically take it to the sink and just let the water flow through to the bottom of the pot. And then I just let it drain completely. Take 15-20 minutes if you need to, so that when you put it back in on the saucer or back into its pretty little sleeve that they sometimes give you, it's not sitting in water. That's the surest way to get all your bracts to fall off. So both over and under watering can cause problems. If your lower leaves start to turn yellow, they're going to drop off, and that means that they're overwatered. If your leaves start to droop or wilt, that's because it's too dry, and again, it will drop its leaves prematurely. So if you want to keep it looking beautifully, make sure that it's constantly damp, not wet, but it's not dry and it's not soggy. You got your now we're back to holiday cactus. Again, it likes bright indirect light, and again 60 to 70 degrees, cooler at night. Soil should be kept evenly moist during flowering stage. If they get too much light or exposed to drafts or temperature extremes, so if you typically turn your heat way down when you go to work and then turn it way back up again when you come home, that's not good for the cactus. You've got to keep it at a fairly steady temperature. And the soil should not get too dry or too wet. But if you've got to err on one side, dry is better than wet. With amaryllis, I'm assuming you're going to be getting one and potting it up yourself so that you can watch it from beginning to end. Or you've got one that you saved from last year. They like to have a narrow container so that their roots can stay confined. And you want one that is not much wider than the bulb itself and is twice as tall. Why twice as tall? Well, that means you can set it down in and the roots will be able to fill up and hopefully keep it from falling over as it grows up. If you're concerned about the soil that you're putting in coming out the bottom of the pot when you water it, just put a dryer sheet, and you can do this with any plant. A used dryer sheet at the bottom of the pot will keep any potting material in the pot, and you won't have it running out all over your sink. When you're potting it, put about half of make the pot half full, and you want to use sterile new potting soil that is high in organic matter, such as peat moss. If you buy an amaryllis bulb that's all boxed up and it comes with the potting soil and the pot, you're all set. But if you don't have that, if you've got a bulb from last year, you're gonna want to get some potting soil that is very high in organic matter. You will set the bulb on top of that half-filled potting soil, and the top is going to sit above the edge of your container. So if you have to add more potting soil so it can be above. And then you're going to surround it with additional potting soil and tamp it down really firm. You'll leave about a third to a half of the bulb above the soil line. It doesn't want to be buried. Water thoroughly, but again, allow the excess water to drain out. put it in a sunny window. It loves sun. That's what's going to trigger its growing. And water whenever you do the finger test and you find that the top 1 to 2 inches or your first knuckle is the soil feels dry. And you're going to want to fertilize your amaryllis. Remember, this is a new bulb. You do this with any new plant you might have, and you're going to fertilize with half the recommended strength every time you water. This is going to encourage the plant to bloom. Now, look at your fertilizer, and it has 3 numbers. It might be 10, 10, 10. It might be 10, 20, 15, like I show here. And that represents the level of the nutrients that are in your fertilizer. And the numbers represent the 3 major needs for a plant: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And phosphorus is the key to flower development. So you do want to see if you can find a fertilizer that has more phosphorus, or at least the same amount of phosphorus as it does either nitrogen or potassium. Now, when the buds begin to open, you want to move the plant out of direct sunlight. That will damage the blossoms if you leave them in direct sunlight. Now, here's something I found on the Laid Back Gardener blog. His name is Larry Hodgson. He tells us that when an amaryllis bulb is ready to bloom, it will flower, no matter what, whether you plant it or not. Ideally, he says, it should be potted up before it blooms so it can establish a healthy root system. However, he talks about the living dead amaryllis. And I'm sure you've seen these in the stores. They even have them for Halloween and Thanksgiving. They cut the root off and they cover it with wax, or they pound it into, put a nail into it so it stays on a board. That amaryllis bulb will never, ever bloom again. So if you want to have it from year to year, this is not the type of amaryllis you want to buy. And he calls it the living dead amaryllis because it will grow, it will bloom, but it is dying as it does that. All right, when the blooms are gone, the first one I want to talk about are poinsettias. First, I would consider whether keeping your poinsettia going all year long is worth it. They're relatively inexpensive, and so you want to ask if the effort you put into it will be worth it. And they won't necessarily be attractive year-round plants. Many experts would say, oh, cut your losses and put it in your compost pile. Well, you want to do it anyway? There's an easy way or a hard way. I put the hard way in your handout. I'm going to talk about the easy way. Otherwise, we'll be here all day talking about it because it runs for about 6 pages. Okay, blooms are gone. Poinsettias can be beautiful green shrubs, and you can keep them looking beautiful for a long time if you treat them like any other houseplant. But the thing you need to do if you want them to start developing those brightly colored bracts is you have to remember that they're short day plants. What does that mean? Well, the bloom starts to form when the days are less than 12 hours long. Well, so that's somewhere around the fall solstice in September. So that's a good date to keep in mind if you want them to rebloom. And flowering will begin about 2 months after that. So you're figuring it will start somewhere in the middle to the end of November. So they'll be just perfect for the holidays. Now, how do you emulate those short days? Well, again, there's a hard way and there's an easy way. The hard way is you're going to find a dark closet or a big box or something place where you can put your poinsettia without damaging it at 4 o'clock every afternoon. And then every morning at 8, you're going to take it out of the box or the closet and put it where it can get some sunlight. If you miss a day, just one day, all bets are off. It won't happen. That's the hard way, because let's face it, you might have to be to work at 7, or you might want to stay out for dinner someday, whatever. So that's going to be hard to do. The easy way is just find a room that's rarely ever used, that is moderately sunny during the day. And then you remove all sources of artificial light. Now, if that means taking the light bulbs out of the lamps so that you don't forget and turn on a light, because believe me, that'll do it. Or you can just not use that room for the 2 months that you want it to start blooming. At any rate, you can do that. I don't know that I have a room that I could do that with, but you may have a spare room that you're not expecting guests for the next 2 months, and so it might work. And if you need something in that room, you can always get it during the daytime when the sun's out. So it's not like you can't ever go in the room. You just don't want to turn on any lights after 4 p.m. Or you can actually just place your plant near a window that's going to get sunlight, but put a barrier between it and any artificial light sources. It could actually sit behind a bank of other plants. You just want to keep it from getting any artificial light during the off light hours. Now, once the central leaves start to take on their Christmas color, you're done. You don't have to worry about this in and out stuff. You don't have to worry about not turning on the lights or anything else. You're ready. As soon as it starts to show the color, you know it's gotten all that short light time that it needed. Okay. Moving to holiday cactus, after flowering, you're going to put the plants in a slightly cooler area, and you're going to not water it quite as frequently. You keep your plants on the dry side throughout the winter, not totally dry, but you don't water them as often as you water all your other plants. When you notice that active growth is beginning in the spring, then you're going to start watering regularly. And you fertilize about once a month during the spring and summer. And I typically go with the half of what the recommended amount of fertilizer is. So as someone who grows orchids once told me, do it weekly. All right. Again, holiday cacti flowering is controlled by temperature and light, or day length, just like poinsettias. So if you want to initiate flowering, you're going to put them in a cool location between 40 to 65 degrees and provide only natural light. Follow everything we just talked about with poinsettias. And once you've moved them, leave them be, because they're very sensitive, and you can lose all your buds by moving your plants around. I bet it'll like this room better than that room, or oh, there's a drought, and drafts and excess watering will also cause bud drop. That's why when you first buy these plants, you always double check to make sure that their soil is not excessively wet. With amaryllis, I like to save mine from year to year, and this is what you do in order to have them ready for bloom next holiday season. You keep your plants actively growing after the blooms are gone. Now you do cut the flowers when they fade because that prevents seed formation. When a plant goes into seed formation, it does not expand the energy in bulb or root development. So you want to cut the flowers off so they don't form seeds. And but you're going to leave the stalk up there, much as you do with the daffodils in the spring. You leave the stalks and the leaves until they turn yellow. And then you're going to move your plant back to a sunny location, believe it or not, and continue to water and fertilize. Come spring, you're going to move your amaryllis outside, and you're going to acclimatize it to being outside by starting it in a shady spot, much as you do when you transplant tomatoes and peppers in your vegetable garden. And then you're going to slowly move it to its summer home, where it's going to sit in a nice sunny location where it gets at least 6 hours a day. And you can plant the pot and all, so you don't have to repot it the next year, in the ground or leave it on a patio. You are going to fertilize it monthly to build up the nutrients in the bulb. You will, I missed a bullet point there, but bring your amaryllis indoor before the first frost, because they will not survive frost or freezing temperatures. And they will rebloom on their own, but there are some things you need to do if you want them to bloom at Christmas. Okay, so put your amaryllis bulb in a dark location where it's 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So I typically just take it down to my basement where it's not going to get much light, and the leaves dry out. And then you're going to, when they do dry out, you're going to cut them off. Leave the amaryllis bulb in the dark for 8 to 12 weeks and don't water it. Peek at it every once in a while after the 8 weeks and see when new growth appears. That means the flowering process is starting all over again. Now, if new growth hasn't started, then and it's getting close to the time you want it to start growing, that would be about 4 to 6 weeks before you want it in bloom. You're going to move the plant to a sunny window. That will encourage it to put out its shoots. And it will take 4 to 6 weeks to bloom. So if you want it in bloom by the early part of December, well, then get it going in the early part of November, or even latter part of October. Now, that's pretty much all I have for you.